ladies. I want to tell you about a very special event that I'm holding this October. It's my live virtual event called Ignite Your Life, and I really want you to attend. This 3-day virtual experience is designed for smart, successful women just like you so that you can become your authentically beautiful self. You'll learn how to attract a high-quality man and propel you forward on the right path to love. This event is taking place October 14th through the 16th, and it will be the only event of its kind this year. I want you to join us and a whole community of really successful women for this transformative 3-day event where you're going to learn the unique process that will help you attract an amazing man who is completely enchanted by you. I'm also giving you a special gift because you're part of our amazing and supportive podcast community. For the first 50 women who sign up to go to Ignite Your Life from our podcast community, I'm giving you $20 off the ticket price. So to access this discount, use the promo code by typing the word IGNITE at checkout. You'll save your spot for just $77, but you must act quickly because these spots are filling up fast. So to register, go to IYLVIP.com or find the link in our show notes. We look forward to seeing you there.
You're listening to Life Check Yourself with life coach, transformational leader, and dating and relationship badass, Marni Batista. Every week, you'll get the raw truth from top experts and real people on the important life and love issues you want to know about. So if you're ready to life check yourself in your relationships, your career, and the areas of your life that matter most to you, and you're not afraid to be called out on your stuff, then you're ready for what's next.
Life Check Yourself with Sara McElroy. Why having a career that's thriving and a love life that sucks says a lot more about why you're single than you think. Ladies, oh my goodness, you are going to be so pumped from this conversation. I have Sara McElroy with us today, and she's a former hustle culture devotee, which I just love that. Like, it is so powerful. That is how Sara sort of frames herself. She's an ex-chief marketing officer. She's the Wall Street Journal's poster girl for pandemic career burnout. I love this. She's a 2-time member of the Great Resignation. She resigned in 2021 and 2022. And she had a stress-induced shingles diagnosis in early 2021. And she decided to hit the reset button on her life. So she quit that, like struggle, juggle job, the CMO job she probably worked her whole life for. Then she trekked to Peru's Sacred Valley to reset her frayed nervous system. And she moved from Atlanta to Florida. She was like, okay, fresh job, fresh start, only to return to some deeply ingrained cultural issues that were so not in alignment with who she is. And she walked away again. And now she has spent her time beginning to explore the stories, breaking points, and defining moments that have led women to seek greater opportunity. And she created, out of all that, Raze to Rise, which I'm super excited to talk about, which is an organization created to amplify women's voices from the Great Resignation and inspire others to blaze new trails in their own careers. I mean, wow. I mean, was it easier the second time to resign than the first?
Marni, that is the truth. Yes, absolutely. Because it becomes a muscle almost, not so much a quitting muscle. I don't want it to come across like I'm not the person who just thinks everyone should walk out tomorrow, but it becomes that muscle that we flex when we know that something is not right and we have to move on. We're able to get to that breaking point more quickly once we know what we're willing to tolerate and what we're not.
I love this. I'm in a mastermind, a life design mastermind myself. And there's a woman in there just last night who was saying, like, she's in this job and she kind of put forth all these possibilities to the people that work above her and around her so that she could stay. It's a career where she had the summer off. She goes back, it's fall. She's like, okay. And nothing changed. And within like 3 days, she's like, not working. And it took her so long to get to that point, like at the beginning of the year. So once you start to have self-awareness of what you will no longer tolerate, in that way, it's like you're listening to yourself better.
Yes, you're building that self-trust. And for me personally, that was such a huge realization coming out of all of this, is that I didn't have self-trust. I was on the other side of all of this, or before my two great resignation walk away situations. I was that quintessential corporate good girl. It was like, you give me that playbook, and I will work harder than anyone else. I'll wear that as a badge of honor, being able to work up to 20 hours a day. I will do exactly what's asked of me. I will not rock the boat. I will be that perfect corporate soldier. But in doing that and trusting our lives, our future in the hands of, companies, employers, even I was like that in school too. It was an outsourcing of my own power, authority, agency, all of those things. I never cultivated self-trust in Sara. I didn't even know who I was, because I was building myself and my life according to what everyone else said I should do. So yeah, I think you're spot on with it.
There's so many things I just want to go in 14 different directions. Okay, focus. Well, one thing that I heard the other day was that that big companies, or a lot of companies, the way this person said, they're psychopathic, meaning they're the ultimate narcissist. They literally don't give two shits about anybody who actually works for. And I thought, wow, that's such an interesting way to think about it. And if you look, and I always say, ladies, if you're like, what does this have to do with men or dating and relationship? How you do one thing is how you do everything, right? And so if you have a series of bad boyfriends, do you also have a series of bad bosses, bad organizations, just generally putting up with shit? So how does this become insidious? Because you don't start out saying I'm going to sell my soul, right? So where do we cross the line? Why do we cross the line? How do we know if we've crossed the line?
Well, I think it starts really young, and that's the hard thing for many women, is good girl conditioning is very real. And you think about in school, what we're rewarded for is being obedient and having the right answer and not asking questions that can get us in trouble. And so when we're taught and rewarded for following the rules our entire lives, then all of a sudden we get into the corporate world, we're going to do that same sort of thing too. So if we've not been taught to look inside of ourselves, to make decisions and to be able to determine what is good for us and what isn't, that's how we get stuck in these situations. And that's what I found myself in. And that's why I was so fascinated to speak with other women from the Great Resignation, because I'm thinking, I can't be the only woman who is mired in these spin cycles of burnout, because she's going from one organization to another. And even if you're changing perhaps some things along the way, like I did reduce my hours between job or Great Resignation number 1 and Great Resignation number 2. But what I had not done is I hadn't done that deeper internal work to come to a place of I am worthy and I don't, I deserve to be treated well and respected and valued in this organization. My voice deserves to be heard. And without that deeper work, though, I would have just continued for the duration of my career until another point in time where I may have woken up. But that's what I think you're really, where you're thinking about it from the standpoint of what is my worth, not only at work, but in all of my relationships. And I am just inherently worthy. I'm not identifying with my work. I'm not identifying with the person I'm dating or my spouse. It's who am I at my core? We have to come back to that place to be able to become that sort of that stone that in a storm, it stays like you're a rock. Kind of a thing, the wind can blow around it and blow over it, rather than a leaf being blown about and letting our lives just be determined by these other factors and, corporate bosses and bad supervisors and things. So yes, it's a fascinating piece that I love that you picked up on right away, Marni, and that this is not just about Great Resignation, quitting, getting better jobs with higher salaries, or even reducing the amount that we're working and work-life balance. This is so much deeper. This is reconnecting with who we are and our worth at our core. And we're now seeing this groundswell of a movement of women being able to come back to themselves and make choices that are better for them moving forward, because we were never taught how to do that in the first place, or at least the bulk of us were not.
I love that. I'm writing a book about this very thing, about how we're trained with our shoulds, and
yes, exactly.
right. Exactly. And we get to this point, we're like, okay, well, if I raised my kids in Los Angeles. I grew up in Iowa and, in the 80s, right? So I think this has just gotten like more inflamed over time, right? Where they're like, okay, you need to get to the right middle school. You need to go to the right college.
Right.
You need to get the right internship. The rights, like the like I do this and the reward. I feel like the steps are getting like amplified 100x.
Yes.
Right? And then you do that thing. You're like, I don't feel fulfilled yet. Okay, well, maybe it's the next thing. So if there's like one big should, like if you could say like start somewhere, what's one rule, I'm using air quotes, that listeners can start to see as a question rather than an absolute?
Yes. I mean, I think it really, the starting point for many women is, what is my definition of success?
Because
yeah, exactly. We've been given this picture of what it looks like, and you're just expected, you climb the corporate ladder, you're pulling down fatter paychecks, you got the fancy titles. And I did that same thing too. I thought it was going to bring me fulfillment as well. I was mightily proud of reaching the C-suite by the age of 35. But then I get there and I have absolutely no life and identity outside of work and school. That is just all that I am. And I'm realizing I am so miserable, and that I have built my life on essentially a house of cards. And so that's actually where the term Raze to Rise comes from, because it was like, this isn't even just about my career and finding a new job. This is like raising it all to rebuild based on what is really like, what do I want for my life? What is important to me? What do I value? What would I want my lifestyle to look like as far as the number of hours I would want to work? I think where we start with all of this is like, okay, what is the picture of success that was taught to me? What was I led to believe? Because the belief systems that we pick up from others, to your point, from society, but even from our parents or our friends or our teachers or anything along the lines, those can end up being really damaging and insidious, where we never consciously chose them, but we are operating our lives based on other people's belief systems for what it means to be a successful professional woman. So it becomes it kind of, I'm saying it in a strong way, but it becomes actually this journey of curiosity and being really gentle with yourself too, as you're exploring your answers to these questions, because it can also be pretty painful too. Like I'll say that from my personal experience, to have to be like, oh, okay, Sara, you had the perfect on paper life and you realized you didn't want it, but now it's going to have to be, this is a mirror kind of a moment. I'm going to have to look up to the mirror to figure out what this is actually going to mean moving forward. What am I going to have to change? And for me, it really was like hitting the life reset button. But you're gentle with yourself in that. You're not judging yourself, because I could have beat up myself like, Sara, you should have known better to throw everything into work and define yourself by that and objectify yourself really on what you can produce and the value you can create for an employer. But I didn't know any better. I was just doing the best that I could, as we all do as women.
You don't know what you don't know.
Exactly.
I think this question of like, what is success, and just totally saying like, if I could, and it's so hard, but imagine you, like, what's that Kimmy character who lived in a hole for like 20 years or whatever? She came.
Oh, Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt.
Yeah. Right. Yes. And you walk out and you're like, I know nothing. Right. Like what am I going to create? It's a blank slate. And I think that is really scary. And the one thing I want to ask you about this, because I see this with women all the time that I work with and that come through our doors, is that because of everything you're talking about, that they do, that is the one place in life where they get validation, right? And a lot of that striving is coming from not feeling enough, which comes from, way back, right? And so you're like, cool, I get a hit like 10 times a day.
Exactly.
Right. And so I'm afraid to explore more intimacy in my relationship, or I'm afraid to actually date and put myself in a place where I might get rejected, or I don't feel in control. Why is it really important for someone to not have all their validation and their worthiness? I mean, we've already established like it's not so good to get external validation. If you do, why is that like doubly going to be limiting to you if you're afraid to go anywhere outside that zone?
It's a great question. Well, and I think I can answer this too I got divorced in 2014. And so on the other side of it, I was 29 years old. I'm like, oh, okay, I'm not going to have the family that I thought or the relationship that I thought, at least for now. And it was like the life preserver I had to get me through that time, because I was also going through some difficulties with my family. Like that was the one thing that was left for me. So when I look back on that version of Sara, I have immense compassion for her, because I was just holding on and just for dear life trying to figure out what I needed to do to survive and to like feel decent about myself again. And so what we need to do then is realize that just because we can get validation there and it's societally approved, like it's a good thing to be, it's a virtuous thing to have work ethic and to work hard, just because that's been given a societal stamp of approval doesn't mean that it's a normal functional thing to put all of your eggs in the career basket. But I just thought like, this is the one good thing I can do. And again, going back to childhood, if we're praised for all of that in school and that's like a very clear cut path to worthiness, then of course that's going to be something that we do and we go down that road. But I totally agree in that what eventually ended up happening is that I was able to ignore a lot of other things in my life and let my personal life completely stagnate, because it was always just like, well, the job needs this, or once I graduate, it can be different, or, it just felt like if I got that title, that would be enough and it would make up for what was missing in the rest of my life. And what I realized though, is that's not being a real human. That's not being a whole human who is here for the whole experience. And to your point, for the beauty of love and the messiness of it all too. So for me, it was a way to hide from the mess as well, because it's like you just follow the corporate rule book and you're praised, you're given money, and everybody thinks it's a good thing, but you're not allowing yourself to your fullest human expression when you're putting all of your worth, your value, your time into your work.
I had a client once who described it this way. She said, I woke up at 40 something and realized work was never going to love me back.
Yes. Isn't that the truth? Well, and to your point of what you were saying with companies, some companies are doing better culture-wise and do have more respect and value for their employees. But for the most part, it's really not the case. And you think like, if I were gone tomorrow, they'll find somebody else to fill my spot. Period. And that's what they ultimately did. I mean, I'll be honest, with my second great resignation, I was dealing with a sexual harassment situation that wasn't being properly investigated for months. And so as I'm begging for an investigation to be done, finally it gets done, but it was so cursory and check the box when I got the readout from it. This is like 4 months of missteps and 3,000 words of documentation. And the woman reads back to me her investigation findings months later in 4 minutes. And I'm just like, this is just because you guys want me off your back at this point. So that night, I drafted this like blistering anti-harassment resignation letter, because I'm pissed at this point. I'm pissed not just for myself, but for all of the women in that organization. And so I took my laptop in the next day and I hit send on the letter in the office to my boss, HR, and the CEO. And I walked out. I was done. I didn't even give 2 weeks notice. No, nothing. But that's what we have to remember is like, they'll figure it out, right? I'm sure they were frustrated with
because
me,
they're psychopathic.
Like, that's not the end of the world for them. Yeah.
Right. They'll just go. They're like the ultimate F boy. They'll just go find someone else who will answer and text back when you say, hey, at midnight. They'll be like, yes, of course I will. I will answer your email. My daughter works for a company, her first job out of college, that after a year, she was like, so my boss still thinks it's like, the Wolf of Wall Street, 1985. And I'm not working at midnight at 11 o'clock, like at midnight on a Saturday night. Like I'm not. Like, I know that I don't have to do that. And I was just, first of all, so proud of her that she knew that she didn't have to do that. but she took the pay cut, to go to another job and do something different. But I think that also is a really important piece, is that, and it goes back to, and I'm going to keep circling around to like, what is it that means success to you? And so, is it really money? Like, right?
Yes.
Like, is that really the measure of a meaningful life? The kind of car you drive, the amount of money in your 401k. I remember when my dad was dying from cancer, and he was fine, then he wasn't. And it was like the last 4 days of his life. And he was barely even speaking. But I remember, and it just struck me, this was like the beginning of my starting to ask these same questions. He was mumbling about his credit card bills. And I was just like, and he worked till literally the bitter end.
Wow.
And I had this huge moment, and I was like, is this really what it's all about at the end? Like, that you're worried about, like, do I have, are my credit card bills going to get paid? Should I have bought that XYZ? And I just thought, like, to me, that's not what I want to be thinking about. Like, if I'm thinking about stuff at the end of my life, I don't want to be worrying about freaking money, right? Like, I don't want to be worrying about, like, was I successful in that way? And so I just really like to share that story, because I think that we would say we wouldn't do that, but with all that neural programming,
yes, exactly.
That's kind of it. Okay. So let me ask you another question. I've just been dying to have this conversation with someone publicly. Because you were talking about how you resigned from your jobs. And I'm really curious what you think about quiet quitting. Because when I think about quiet quitting and I parallel it to quiet, like quitting on a relationship, to me, that just reads passive aggressive.
Oh,
right?
Yes.
Like, I'm just going to start to pull away. I'm just going to start to not do any stuff. I'm going to not try as hard in this relationship anymore and see if you notice. I'm going to sort of like lean out and start to put my guard up and like see if that changes it. Maybe you'll want me more, right? Like, so and I'm curious, because like I said, never been in corporate. Like, what do you think about the whole quiet quitting thing?
Oh, I mean, that is such an interesting analogy, teeing it up like that in conjunction with how we can do that in relationships too. Well, here's the thing with quiet quitting, no one has established across the board exactly what it means. Because for some people, it's like, yeah, I'm going to be like Ron Livingston from Office Space and, 0 F to give. And I'm just going to do whatever. But then for some people, it actually just means I'm going to work my normal hours and I'm going to have better boundaries. You know what I mean? So there's a spectrum and a scale. I think.
But wait, let me ask you this question. So why do you do that quietly?
What do you mean?
Well, this is my question in both cases. And I just really am trying to like understand it. And because I'm trying to make the analogy for setting boundaries in relationships or any other part of your life. Is there a value to doing it quietly, or is the quiet part just like, I don't need to talk about it, I'm just going to do it? Like, I don't need to get permission, I'm just living it. I'm curious about the quiet part, because anytime I hear doing anything quietly, I'm like, why are you hiding? Or is that like,
fair?
Or is it a safety thing? So I'm curious, like, what does that mean?
Well, okay. So I understand what you're asking now. And I think you make a great point in that regard. Here's what I think. I believe I've spoken with dozens of women from around the globe for Raze to Rise. So these are women not only now from the Great Resignation, but I've also spoken with women who have made leaps before and can look back with the benefit of hindsight. And what I believe is that the one red thread that ran through all of my conversations when women were saying they decided to quit, they just had a knowing that it was time to leave, which I was blown away, because some women would also do some cerebral exercises or mental gymnastics, like a spreadsheet or pro-con list or things like that. But she always came back, like the ultimate deciding factor was this knowing within her, like, I just know I have to leave and be done. But what I think is happening is that with quiet quitting, we are playing with this idea. Like, we're coming upon this knowing is what I think. Like, eventually we're going to get to that knowing that we're going to have to leave. This is more still in the rumbling stage. So what I ended up doing is actually I mapped a 6-stage journey through which we go through this process of walking away. And rumbling is really that first stage where we're seeing the misalignment. We're feeling fragmentation. There are cracks and fissures in our reality. We're feeling disillusioned, irritable. We can have physical health crises that are starting to pop up, but it's like, okay, I'm starting to realize something is not quite right here. And then you do come to that point of knowing, and it can either be like that Hollywood light bulb moment, oh my God, I'm going to have to leave. It can be a gradual build of like collecting these little data points of these, slights or negative experiences that ultimately lead you to that moment of recognizing you're going to have to walk away. Or it can even be just like kind of a moment of peaceful acceptance. Like, I'm not going to be able to change this situation. I'm just going to have to extricate myself from it. So anyway, I say all that in that I believe quiet quitting is us playing in that rumbling stage and not yet reaching that point of knowing. The other thing that happens though, too, is that we may have that knowing, but that doesn't mean that we will actually take the action to leave. So there are two additional milestones that are really key after it's making the decision. Like, that is the fork in the road moment that we have to face. And then it is taking that physical action to submit a resignation letter and sever our relationship with the job or go after a new career or whatever it is. So what can happen is that we can get to that point of knowing, but end up going back to rumbling before we even make it to decision, because we're like, I can't, leave for XYZ reason. So I think everyone is having more awareness around what they want, what's making them unhappy, what's even arbitrary related to work that was all kind of just made up pre-pandemic. Because certainly we saw that a lot of the ways of working that we'd established as like the gospel were not necessarily true. I think everybody's starting to realize these things and ask themselves questions like, what does success look like? What is the right size of work in my life? And so quiet quitting is a way to capture a little bit of that power, even if we are not ready to completely pull the ripcord yet.
I love this because it goes back to that issue of self-trust.
Yes.
Right. Which is like, if I'm quietly quitting so first of all, before these people go throw these viral terms around, could they just define them instead of letting everybody,
a glossary.
Yeah, we definitely need a glossary. Because I just totally didn't understand it that way. And what I like about this is that it's this part of reflection where you're like, something's not working for me. I'm going to start setting some boundaries. I'm going to start evaluating and asking the questions. The other thing that I want to talk about, because I think I'm looking at our time, so I'm like, oh, we could talk forever, is that you do not have to blow your life up like to rise, right? Like,
yes,
because I think in my own journey, I worked so hard to have everything. And then I just sold, it wasn't fulfilling. So I sold my house. I bought the RV. I'm living on the road. I'm trying to figure out what's fulfilling. Right. And I think people think like, oh, I'm blowing up my life. I have to like go do a soul searching trip in Peru. I have to go live in a van. I have to live off my savings. Right. And I just am wondering, like, that's so binary.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
Not everybody is a radical, defines it in the same way. So I always think of like living radically is like a rerouting or a reorienting to what feels true for you. So can you just address this idea of like, how do you do this work in a way that feels authentic to who you are and that you don't have to like, slam the door?
Yes, absolutely. No, I love that question so much because I think there's a misconception even with when I'm doing these kinds of interviews that people are thinking that I'm just saying every woman walk out tomorrow and everyone walk out and start your own business. And like that could not be further from the truth too, in that like we have to do things in our own timing that fits with us and in ways that is comfortable to our nervous system and honors the type of threshold that we have for change and risk taking. It's in our biology. We have to respect those things. So it's not a matter of just, ripping the Band-Aid off. Everybody quits, everybody walks away, everybody starts a business, because a lot of people really do enjoy the stability and security of a corporate life. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just more about getting clear on your values and what's meaningful to you. And what I love too is that I'd come across some of the newer literature and research on micro steps and sort of taking baby steps in the direction of somewhere that you want to go or something that you want to explore, so that you aren't doing sort of overwhelming of your system by making really massive changes all at one time. But that actually came through in my interviews with women too, is like these baby steps of starting to take a class or volunteer or like get more connected with that intuitive part of you. Explore what those nudges mean. It's nothing says that you have to just go out and, burn it all down tomorrow. It just becomes taking inventory and doing more of that conscious, intentional work. So you're architecting your career from a place that is true and whole to you, rather than just taking, to your point, the shoulds and just following all the rules and what everybody else thinks you should do. It's really this beautiful coming home to yourself that I think is at the heart of this work.
I love that. One of the things that I think is a really important question to ask, well, not a question, is a foundation for this whole process. And I hear you really talking about that. It's like the quality of the questions that you're asking, right?
Yes.
And I see that as like, did you seek wisdom? It's not like just the, like what's the next job that I should do? Or,
yes, exactly.
What skills do I have that are transferable? Like that I hope someone will give me an offer, even though I'm changing markets or changing niches or whatever it is. And so I love that this whole process starts with just that seeking of wisdom and that quiet.
Yes.
I think the quiet thing is the listening. Like, how can we get quiet and listen?
Yes. Exactly. Oh my gosh. I love it so much. You totally get the direction that all of this is headed, in that I believe we are rewriting the women's career playbook right now. And we are tapping into more of those intuitive capabilities and the softer skills and strengths and the EQ that we have, that we often had to cut off in the workplace, which was designed by men for men. And we've just been slotted in. But we're reconnecting with those parts of ourselves to determine what's going to be right for us moving forward, rather than just following some sort of prescriptive thing. And I love what you said too, in that we were taught to make decisions based on how it's going to look on a piece of paper. Like to take the whole summation of you as a human on a one single piece of paper, maybe 2 pages, because you're allowed to if you're later on in your career, but to be like, the entirety of the value that you bring as a human and the choices that you've made in your life, and you're going to make choices based on what that looks like. I was one of those people. I mean, really, I was holding on in the CMO job because I felt like I had to make it a year, and I didn't. I ended up quitting after 10 months. But, when somebody told me, I was working with a coach at the time, and she was saying like, you could just quit and walk away. And I didn't have another job lined up or anything. And it was like this record scratch moment in my brain of like, does not compute. Like, that's okay. I can do that. I can make these choices, and it can look like it can be not so great on my resume. Oh my God, mind blowing when we start to think about our lives being for us and not for the piece of paper, our careers really not being for that piece of paper. So I love that you hit the nail on the head with that.
Well, when you were describing that, I was thinking like that there's it's as if there's the great HR director in the sky, like right. And then there's the corporate 10 commandments, and one of them is thou shalt not say less than a year. Right?
Exactly. Absolutely. Yes. There's all these rules that are actually not even so unspoken. Like they're the rules that we were taught. They're the gospel. You follow them and you will be blessed with career success for the rest of your life. And it's like, No, that actually isn't what we realize we all want. Like all of us COVID kind of became this great equalizer in all of us returning to our humanity and realizing that like there may be more to all of the machinations of the society that we've created and all of the things that we think are important, the things that we put on a pedestal. Let's get back to the core of who we are and start making conscious decisions for our lives and our careers. And so for me, it's like the most exciting moment for women empowerment in the workplace. We're doing it.
I love that. And I know that for some of you, you're listening and you're like, that's scary, right? And
yes,
I don't want to ask 100%. Questions because if I ask the questions, if I listen to that knowing, then I have to do something or will I have to do something? And I think that, and this is the last thing we probably have time for, but I just definitely want to hear your take on it. You know, I don't know if we can have it all as women or we can have it all at the same time, but I know that we can create what we desire when we desire it. And so for those of you who are listening, who are like, you know, work is my life. I don't have time to date. I'm too busy to have a relationship. I make more money and I need to find someone who makes as much money, like all this identity stuff.
Yes.
What would you say to those people who are like, you know, the call, so to speak, to creating a full expression of yourself, not just in one way? What do you say to them that are trying to hide out in work or to sell themselves on only having one area thrive?
Sure. Ooh, I think it's a really powerful question because what we start to see is that anytime we attach our identity to something and our worth to something external, like our careers, and we're throwing all of our time in that, we're starting to build a cage of our own making, really, and like creating our own limitations around what we are capable of and what we even want. We start to build this cage. And in some ways it is protective because it makes us not do what you said, which is that self-reflection that can be really, really scary. And so I love that you brought that to bear in this conversation. Like I would want to say to every woman out there, like, it's frightening work at times, but it's really beautiful and you'll be better for it when you start to say, okay, what are the walls of this cage that are of my own making? What fit for a time? Because it could be like for me, post-divorce, that cage worked and it kept me safe and kept me going when I was like rock bottoming, honestly. So that worked for a time, but then it was like, that doesn't fit anymore. What can I loosen up and let go of so that Sara can fully fly and spread her wings? And part of it was letting go of that piece of it that was my identity. So it's an easy thing to get caught in that hamster wheel, just going and going and going week after week. And you don't then have to look at those other things and those other nudges. But what I would say is just be curious and be gentle on yourself. So I actually had this exact moment where about this time last year, I was working with that coach and she'd said that she was working with a woman who basically said, like, if she was really to look at her entire life across the board and why she was unhappy, she'd have to change everything. And that was like a kind of, shocking moment. And, I'm thinking for myself, I just took this job in Florida. Like I'm going to be in this marketing role here and I'll do these other things in my life to, have better boundaries and greater self-care. And I started dating and found a boyfriend down here and stuff and expanded in that way. But the thought of changing everything was really frightening. So what I will say is, yes, I ultimately did do that because that was the right path and that's where the nudges were taking me. But it took time and I allowed that knowing and that wisdom to integrate rather than overwhelming myself and thinking, like, to your point, I'm going to have to sell the house and get the RV tomorrow. I have to walk out of the job and with no 2 weeks notice tomorrow. It's not like that at all. It's an amazing thing where like we are a society of instant gratification, but we forget that when we take baby steps consistently every single day, you'll do that. And then 6 months from now, you'll be like, oh my gosh, I actually did make some really amazing positive changes in my life. And it didn't require any sort of crazy upending of my entire world.
I love that. It's about being courageous, being curious and having things really line up to, is this authentic to me? Like if you rinse and repeat that, then you can be part of this revolution in creating a life of meaning that is right for this time.
Yeah, and I love it because it's like, that's right. And I love it too, because on one side it is like that fiery, like that revolution feel, like we're changing things, but it's born from a really feminine place of like gentle, soft, curious. There's an easier, better way. The whole masculine climb the ladder, run on, the rat race all the time. It doesn't have to be it. And we're all figuring that out together and building a better world and a better future for women in the workplace as we do it.
Oh, I love it. I love it. I love you, Sara. Ladies.
Thank you. This was amazing.
Thank you. Listen, I think if you listen to this over and over again 100 times, as you should, and of course, share it with your friends, there are multiple opportunities to really allow yourself the gift of curiosity.
Permission.
Permission. I would say that would be my intention for this going out into the universe, is to just say like, I don't even have to change anything. You could just be like, that's cool for you guys. And go back to your life. But give yourself 5 minutes to imagine, the imagine of, you're the unstoppable Kimmy Schmidt. Is that her name?
Yeah. Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt.
Yeah. Unbreakable. Okay. And you're going to walk out into a life like totally of your own. You're going to make the own rules. You're going to make your own sort of vision of what you want your life to be. Just give yourself 5 minutes to even just imagine that moment and ask how would you feel and what would it look like? And thusly an opportunity to life check yourself. Ladies, thanks for stopping by. Sara, you're amazing. And we'll see you all next time. Bye-bye. Hey, thanks for tuning into today's show. So if being in an intimate relationship in which you feel 100% seen, heard, and accepted by a high caliber man is a priority for you right now, and you're interested in seeing if you're a fit for working with me and my team at Dating with Dignity, here's what I want you to do. Just head over to DWD VIP, that's D as in dating, W, D as in dating, VIP.com, and book a call to speak with my team. We'll get on the phone with you for about 60 minutes and you'll get crystal clear on what's stopping you from finding true love right now. We'll also take a look at what you want to create, what you want your whole life to look like when you're able to finally be fully expressed as a woman in a healthy relationship with an incredible guy. And if we can help you get from where you are right now to where you want to be, we will show you the fastest path possible that makes sense for you to do that. We help smart, successful women all over the world solve this one missing piece in their life so they can finally have it all. So to see if we can help you do the same thing, head over to DWDVIP.com. I'm Marni Batista, and let's talk soon.